Welcome back to Tell Me More with me, CJ Quarterbaugh. Tell Me More exists to help bridge the gap in our intergenerational workplace dynamics, build better leaders, and ultimately prepare for the future. I know it's been a while since I've had a podcast episode because life has been crazy. But today, I'm excited to be joined by a good friend of mine, Sir Bradford William Davis. Bradford, welcome to the podcast.
Yo, happy to be here.
Yeah,
I'm happy to tell you more.
Yeah, this is a long time coming. We've been playing phone tag a little bit, so I'm glad that we are finally getting to do this. Now, I know you well. We go back, what is it, a decade or more at this point? Yeah, running through the streets of St. Louis together. Listen, Bradford, tell the people about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do now?
Yeah, I am a lifelong New Yorker, a reader, a writer, a chronic ice cream eater, and I guess most professionally and perhaps most relevant to the podcast, I am a journalist. I've written for a lot of publications, some that you may have read, some that you have not, and I'm experiencing for this point, mostly joys of solo life as far as doing it myself rather than primarily doing it within other publications, other institutions.
All right. So journalist, important. We'll talk about that. But I want to talk about the most important thing you mentioned first. What's your favorite ice cream?
It's a loaded question that could take up the whole podcast, but I'll microwave it down. Let's see. At home, I love two brands. One is Trader Joe's makes an elite coffee ice cream that is just like, kind of always in the freezer. Then there's a brand called, I want to say it's called McConnell's. It's like a store brand I can get, and they make a very good salted cookies and cream, I want to say. Then when I'm out and about, my favorite shop, probably Jenny's, which also a store brand. Now, unfortunately, there's no Jenny's in New York City. There are in other cities, which is St. Louis is one of them. DC. I was in DFW a lot the last year and change, so I got to be well acquainted with that. DC, yeah, Philly, not New York City yet, but
the New York City market's crowded. Jenny's competing with Van Leeuwen.
I think Jenny's will clear though because they're in all the grocery stores now.
Yeah, they're in all the grocery stores now.
It's just a choice. It's their choice that they haven't done it.
Yeah. But it's still a crowded market because Van Leeuwen has taken over the city. I remember when Van Leeuwen had two shops.
Yep, right. I remember when it was a truck.
Yeah, like Salt and Straw has just made their way here.
Oh, yep, that's right.
Ample Hills, they had a lot of financial troubles, which has kept them to one location. Yes. And then you have, Malay. Have you had Malay yet?
Nah, I don't think I've heard of that.
Dog. Okay, Malay. This woman started out of her apartment, like everyone else does, and now has her first shop was in downtown Brooklyn, and then she has another one, I think, in Chelsea Market. And then they opened up a spot in DC. It's Indian flavored ice cream. So these South Asian flavors, like they've got this cardamom cinnamon one. They've got what is it? I want to say it's like a cilantro strawberry. Phenomenal.
Cilantro strawberry. That's not a combo flavor profile that I would immediately gravitate to immediately, but I see the vision.
Yeah. Trust me on this one. Get yourself down to Chelsea Market, hit up Malay. Now, let's talk about the journalism thing. How'd you end up being a journalist?
Man, I just started blogging and people started paying me money. And really, I was not a dyed-in-the-wool journalist. Again, to microwave a longer story. I was working at HBO at the time as a content strategist, marketing content strategist. And I always tell people was that it was the best version of a job I did not want, meaning that it was cool. Like, it was great that I was able to have a living wage, a fire T&E budget, where I was, in LA, Miami Beach, etc., supporting various HBO content, like TV shows and films and documentaries and all that. But it was still a place where I didn't get to critically engage as much as I got to promote. So it was a place to be creative to an extent, but ultimately it all terminated on making you watch the next episode of Ballers. And and I didn't want to watch the next episode of Ballers. I didn't want to watch any episodes of Ballers. Not a very good show. But I know I'm
It
talking to
wasn't as bad
I
as
know
you as yeah,
I'm
it
not
wasn't
talking.
as
I'm
bad
talking
as
to
you say
a
it was.
Dwayne the Rock Johnson stan. I forgot that you're 11 years old, but it's okay.
Listen. We respect Uncle Dwayne around here, even though he has done a lot to hurt his image in recent years.
But listen, yeah, the show, so it was, typically there were lots of shows I got to work on, but the point, even the stuff I really did like, ultimately the end goal was get you to watch a show rather than necessarily get you to think about a show. And that was hard for me personally. Other people are easy with that, and so I was just kind of like thinking, well, if I could get into journalism, I had an internship before, but like if I can get into it again, I'd be open to it. I flash forward to this is early 2019. There was a black baseball player who had pimped out a home run, got beamed by a pitch from a white pitcher, and they got, they said some words, benches cleared, and the pitcher got suspended and the hitter got suspended, even though the hitter didn't do anything that was physically aggressive. And I was like, what's up with that? Everyone kind of was. Apparently, he had said the N-word on stage. I mean, not on stage, on the field. And
the hitter
got very frustrated to put the hitter, yes, exactly, the black hitter, not the, excuse me, that's very important detail, you're right, not the white pitcher, the black hitter. And so I'm like, I'm getting frustrated because first of all, he got suspended a period, but also just the discourse around it felt like nobody really had the range to really discuss like the cultural context here is happening, that this is not a slur in the way that it would be if the roles were reversed. And I started tweeting about it. The editor of the New York Daily News was like, yo, you should write that as a column for us. I did. The column was very successful and ended up getting offered a job to be a columnist. So, and I was like, fire, cool. So I became a columnist, and that was worth taking the risk of leaving what felt like a safe and comfortable job in corporate marketing for a well-established brand. And it's paid off in spades because it was a match of my passions and my talents to be able to just kind of be at sporting events a lot, and write about who won the game, of course, but also write about a lot of deeper trends and themes happening in and around sports. And that's how I got into the biz.
So I guess that's what, 7 years ago now?
Yeah, man, about 2019. Yeah. So.
Wow. So 7 years ago now. So what have the last 7 years been like for you as a journalist?
Man, ups and downs, dude. Like, from the Daily News, I started, I wanted to distinguish myself by not just being someone who gave takes, but also like had a deep well of research and reporting supporting the work I was doing. And so I really started to grow as a reporter in 2020. That led to me doing some work that, I realized could be categorized as investigative journalism, which made me competitive to become an investigative reporter for Business Insider. And that was cool because I got to do like these bigger projects, much longer projects, probably still the most prominent thing to my name to this point, where I basically found out that Major League Baseball was using two different baseballs, like a juice ball and a dead ball. And so, like basically meaning a juice ball, for those who are not, baseball acquainted here, basically means a ball that if you hit it will go further than another, than a ball constructed differently. And then I found even furthermore that there was, at least one of the data set that we had, that the juicier balls were coming to Yankees games, while at the same time that Aaron Judge hit a home run milestone. and Aaron Judge being the star MVP of the New York Yankees, and to be clear, a great hitter with or without, a supportive baseball. But it was interesting that
Wait, let me
the ball he got.
let me pause you there.
Please do.
Who's giving him these balls? Are these coming from the league?
Yes.
So why is Barry Bonds still not in the Hall of Fame? I'm not a big baseball guy, but
right.
I'm just listening.
But that is what that is your train of inquiry is not uncommon among people who read my story. That is where I feel like a liberty to say. But to be clear, Aaron Judge is a great hitter without, I want to just reiterate that, is a great hitter with or without a supportive baseball. That's not like the issue. The issue, and that's what actually makes it, I think, the controversy and scandal perhaps worse than the Barry Bonds one, because it's not an individual doing something. It was a institution that appeared to be, whether out of accident, negligence, or intent, that is not something I've verified or confirmed. Providing a baseball that actually ended up coinciding with a historical accomplishment and making a historical accomplishment more likely. That's what happened as a result of, or I should say not as a result, but in concurrently, I think he used that word with the what Aaron Judge is doing. He was getting a ball that was scientifically speaking more helpful to do what he was doing than other teams were getting based on the data set that I have. So yeah, I got to do cool things like that, but also I would write about more serious things like homicides of trans people and sexual misconduct, all kinds of misconduct in various like athletic settings and workplace settings, regular workplace settings, I should say. And and so I kind of built my name and a brand around someone who's like willing to go there, and will dig deep to try and find things. And so, but Business Insider 2023, they had mass layoffs. I got kind of caught in that. Basically, they put me on the list. They had the union. Thank God for the union that they kind of had my back on this, and but they were like, okay, you keep your job, you can keep a job, but you can't keep the investigative reporter job. And I was like, all right, I'm bet myself. Started freelancing. Then while I'm in a journalism fellowship in 2024, I meet someone who connects me to McClatchy, which is like this big company that owns lots of regional papers all around the America, but not actually New York City. But I was like, you know what, I'm open to anything that lets me do meaningful, distinctive work. And that is what got me to the Fort Worth Star Telegram. Fort Worth being the Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, the home of Jenny's, not the home, but perhaps the landmark for me, right? Yes, the home of TCU for sure, for the college sports heads. And so I kind of took that job. I took this job to be a columnist and member of the editorial board. This time moving entirely from sports. I mean, I'd already done that at Business Insider, but but not only entirely from sports, but also entirely from New York City. And so I had an apartment out there. I would fly back and forth a lot between New York and DFW and back and forth, But I covered a lot of local and regional and state politics in that kind of role, where I got to really enjoy just being at the understanding how local issues had ripple effects that were national and vice versa as well. Tarrant County, for those who are not aware, Tarrant County being the county that houses Fort Worth, I should say, right? Fort Worth being I think it just crossed 1 million people. It's like the 11th largest city in the United States. Tarrant County is the largest Republican-controlled county in all of America. And so for that reason, since Republicans are very invested in keeping Tarrant County red. However, Tarrant County isn't as red as maybe outsiders may understand to be, despite its reputation. There are a lot of signs that the demographics and the politics of the people who live there had been shifting, and so Republicans, while I was there, basically beta tested all of their bad ideas to keep Tarrant County red. One of those things being, again, for the politics heads, a thing that broke national news was the redistricting efforts around the country to try and create more congressional maps more favorable to Republicans, to which then Democrats retaliated by creating, where they could, maps more favorable to Democrats, rather than trying to create maps that are based off of like partisan, nonpartisan fairness, that don't minimize anyone's voting power. It was then now like based on, well, we think that if we draw a congressman's district in this way, people who are, it's more likely that this person continues to be reelected, and it's less likely that someone from the other party does. All that happened.
Is this the same as gerrymandering?
It's gerrymandering, exactly. That's another word for it. But it was gerrymandering. It's this racial gerrymandering, frankly. That worked to try and limit the power of voters from ethnic backgrounds that were less likely to vote Republican. And so,
having lived out there, you know the history of Dallas and how they built the train to purposely divide South Dallas from the rest of Dallas, and that's where they ushered all of the Black people and quote unquote others.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, it's interesting being out there and seeing the expression other side of the tracks, and seeing that's not a that was not just an expression, but it's rooted on like a real reality that exists in places like that. And so I saw that both in Dallas and in the Fort Worth suburbs. But yeah, so anyway, all that happened in Tarrant County first is what I'm trying to get to. Like, Tarrant County was doing that stuff in early 2025 because the Republican judge there, a guy named Tim O'Hare, was like, I want to get maps more favorable, and hey, if it kicks out this, Black liberal, commissioner, it's like kind of like a city council person within like a Texas county, just to translate kind of like, political labels and terms here. But like, if I can get this Black lady out of her district, hey, that's probably, I get a 2-for-1. I'm pantomiming, of course, what I think is in his head, not what he actually said, but it was very clearly racial gerrymandering, and there were many outside groups that analyzed the maps and saw that, and saw that whatever the intent was, the impact was clear. And so when that happened, that is very shortly after Greg Abbott, the Republican governor of Texas, and President Trump, the Republican president of the United States, were like, well, we want some better maps in Texas, and so we're going to cut up the whole state like this, just like what they did in Tarrant County. So I got to see that kind of stuff, and I really loved it, man. But I love, I didn't love, again, democracy dying in front of my eyes. I loved getting to meet people who are fighting for democracy in their communities and building political power, because they had experienced kind of the pangs of, what I think could be, fairly incredibly called fascism, locally, as well as nationally. And so that was a really fun experience, to be out there. And so I was doing that until, November of last year.
So what are you up to these days?
Yeah. So that kind of, belies the question of like, why am I not there now? I got laid off at the start of Telegram. And so I was like, well, I gotta rethink things. I'm never shocked. Again, for people who are not savvy on like journalism, media, it's a very, very precarious industry. It's one of the reasons why I was hesitant first even to leave HBO, as much as I wanted to, do something a little different. But it's a very precarious industry. There are constant layoffs. It's it's no bueno. So I wasn't shocked, but I was surprised because I had maybe a month or so prior to that won about $40,000 to do a project for the newspaper I was working for. And so I was like, if nothing else, man, like I thought I made the economic case like to keep me around. But I've learned that these decisions aren't rational, and you would drive yourself crazy trying to make them rational.
And you were poking at some big bears.
Yeah. That is definitely. And so, many people in the community were very disappointed by that, and believed that there may have been foul play to get me out the paint, because I was very critical of the mayor and of, the mayor of Fort Worth, and in my columns, in my reporting. And so, I have no evidence to that claim, but I can understand why they got there, given that's kind of just how Fort Worth works. Typically, as has been explained to me. So it's a consortium of people who, just kind of run the city, and it makes it very hard to challenge the authorities that exist there. But I lose this job, and I'm like, all right, well, what's next? I started freelancing a bit, and I realized, kind of in the midst of that, man, I could be doing more and better work if I were doing it myself. The reason why I came to that conclusion was because freelancing is also very precarious too. You can pitch something 9 places, and you have editors who will ghost you, who give you a 1-word no, or may meet with you and then ghost you, and then one person gives you a like, oh sure, we'll do it, and they pay you
I'm
poverty wages, poverty wages to do it, 3 cents a word or whatever. I've had stories that have been caught in limbo for literal years because of the failure of the editorial staff to simply edit the draft that was provided to them. And I am not even exaggerating when I say it was that, it was not that they didn't have the draft and they didn't have enough time. It's that it took months and months and months to edit, to the point where the story, lost even its freshness around the subject matter, and the newsworthiness thing that would garner the largest audience around it, because the editorial staff did not edit the work. Like, that kind of stuff happens. I'm like, man, listen, I really appreciate editors, and it's good to have that kind of like back and push and pull of like someone who will tell you, let's try this. I wonder if we do it this way. Maybe not right now, but when it gets loaded, but when that is a compromise due to all of the bureaucracy and and just kind of unprofessionalism as well, it's like, man, like, I could actually do this quicker at this point. Like, I know how to do this work, and so, and also, I just believe that, like, I had the ability to that I had ideas that I know that people would want to read if presented to them. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just start building something something that my job can't own. And I've been I thought I had for years. Well, I started the newsletter.
What's the name of the newsletter? Come on, man. I'm trying to get you out here.
No, I'm about to bring it up. Newsletter is called iBlack. And it EYEBLACK. So again, if you watch a wide receiver, catch a pass, and you might see like some paint under their chin, or the aforementioned Aaron Judge, the baseball hitter, when he slugs a home run, you'll see like, again, like a sticker or some paint, black paint. That's called iBlack. And it helps you focus at like focus on the task at hand. And so our tagline is, iBlack helps you keep your eye on the ball. But we kind of subvert the idea, because this newsletter is not about who won or lost the game. It's about politics and identity and money and power, and how those things are manifest in sports, reinforced by sports, disrupted by sports, or disrupt the sport itself as well. And so when you expand and widen your lens, you can actually, my thesis is that you actually understand sports a little better than just keeping your eye on the literal ball. So that is the idea, iBlack. And so what I'm doing here is I'm doing really like, scoopy, investigative, sports writing that exposes and explains and illustrates how, again, race and money and politics and identity, more broadly speaking, show up in and around sport.
You're looking at the sport behind the sport.
The Game on Top of the Game. If you, for those who've seen the great Netflix Steven Soderbergh movie High Flying Bird.
I have not seen it, but I'll add it to the list.
Bruh, you haven't seen High Flying Bird?
Fam,
you would love that joint.
Time does not exist right now. I'm Dom Toretto in the Fast and the Furious. I'm living my life a quarter mile at a time.
Dog, that joint's like 5 years old, man. Like,
listen,
I'm just, I'm just shocked because it's like knowing you as a hooper, as someone who loves the NBA. It's a again a fictional story, but a very real one about that dynamics at play behind the sport that we both love. As again,
I'm in the vortex of very small children, work, side projects. Like you, I have pitched many places to fall into the rabbit hole, building this. So High Flying Bird, I'm gonna add it. I spend a lot of time on planes now, so I'm always looking for some good flight content.
No, it's a real good one, man. But yeah, so that Game on Top of the Game is really what iBlack is looking at. And so I started this newsletter kind of on a whim. I had camped on the name for a bit, but I decided to like soft launch it, let's say, a few weeks ago with an interview with the chaplain of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Chaplain, again, meaning like someone who, provides like, ministry support, like, for athletes in this context. There are also prison chaplains and chaplains in lots of places. But yeah, anyway, so the reason why I even came across him was because he had been very vocal about the presence of ICE in Minneapolis, in Minnesota as a whole. And so I was like, this is real interesting. I would love to hear more from this person about, like what it's like to be, a member of the Wolves organization in some ways, as well as a citizen in Minneapolis, and what it means to help athletes to kind of live out their values right now, given everything that's happened. And even over the last few years, remember, Minneapolis has been the home of so many like really tragic things. Like, that is where George Floyd was murdered. That is where, of course, and thus the ensuing uprisings. A few years before that, that was where,
did you ever listen to the podcast I produced about Minneapolis?
I sure did.
Yeah. So even in that, like, I learned so much about the history of that city that I just didn't know was there. Like, right. Minneapolis wasn't on my radar pre George Floyd, and then you go and you find out, no, it's just always been like this.
Yeah, man. So there's a lot of reckoning that has happened and needs to still happen, over there. And so, and then now this like unforced era of trauma from the Trump administration, just raining, ICE goons to round up brown people and shoot anyone who comes in their way. And so that was, happening ongoing. This is like late January, when I interviewed him. And the interview was super successful. It got a lot of attention. His mom got nearly arrested while we were on FaceTime. That's why we had to cut it short because of that. Like, and so he also gave a lot of kind of like a look inside the locker room of like, he has relationships with people like Anthony Edwards and, previously Karl Anthony Towns, who he, seems to be like quite close to, now the member of the Knicks, but before that was a longtime Timberwolf. Like, that was really, really, cool and insightful for readers, and again, just kind of I think in the spirit of the kind of things I wanted to do. And it took, and that kind of took off from there. I was like, yo, this is out here. If you want to read, all I need is your email. If you want to support, like, there's a sign up, but right now everything's free. I'm just trying to, build this thing. Build the plane while I flew it, and things have taken, and I've been really grateful because people seem to connect with it, man. So I've been able to do stories that, again, I know would take a much longer time to do if I had to go and do the pitching process, but people want it, like I'm seeing Reddit threads pop up based around articles I write. I found,
so dope.
Like my special interest of late has been the intersection of like, the Trump administration's immigration apparatus as it involves sports. Like, I could be mentioning like money in sports being a big thing for iBlack. One of those, I by kind of just connecting dots and looking at financial disclosures, I found a number of NBA teams and an MLB team who have profited, or I should say, who have ownership groups that have profited from the selling of warehouses to DHS, meaning Department of Homeland Security, that were being converted into ICE detention centers. And if you know anything about these ICE detention centers, they are
They're concentration camps.
Yes, exactly. They fall far below even the standards we expect out of prisons, which are also not good places either. So concentration camps is a very fair way of describing the way that people were treated in those facilities. And so the pro sports to prison pipeline is a real thing, apparently. And so I've been
I want to pull on this thread a little bit.
Yeah,
I want to pull on this thread a little bit with the chaplain for the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards. Recently, there was a bit of controversy with his remarks around what's happening in Minneapolis with ICE, and he basically said, like, I'm not educated enough about this to give an opinion. You have your faction of people who say that athletes should just shut up and dribble, which we don't think is right. But then you have your faction of people who believe that athletes should use their power, their status, their standing in society to speak on issues, and then they get upset at someone like Anthony Edwards, who's like, I don't know enough to say something. What do you feel is the role of the modern athlete in today's times and social climate in either direction?
Yeah, that was a big point of conversation in an interview with the chaplain. His name is Matt Moberg, by the way. Shout out, Matt. Where, he was quite defensive of Anthony and his response in that moment, because he appreciated that it was honest in his view. And it was something, where we don't want, basically something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, we don't want Anthony to give like canned responses that scratch our itch, but we like him because he's authentic and real in that way. Like he doesn't sound buttoned up and corporate like so many high profile star athletes, including those in the NBA. We like that, out of him. And so it's kind of hard to also expect him then to now to give us the statement that we want to make us feel better, that that he is on the issues or whatever. And, I do understand where he's coming from. I think that while we all have a role to play, it's okay for our roles to be different in some ways. When I say a role to play in creating the kind of society that we want, one where people are treated fairly and loved and have all their needs met. And so Ant may not be spokesperson. However, and then to push back on this, like in the conversation, is Ant is a Minnesota resident. The stuff that had been happening for some time of that by the time that he gave that statement. This is all happening in his hypothetical backyard. I can completely understand why people would be concerned or frustrated that he would not inform himself to be able to say more than what he did in that moment. And to be clear, he was supportive. He was like, I love everybody. I wanted this to happen. I love Minnesota. He wasn't like against, anti-ICE rallies or anything like that, to be clear. But he also appeared to be in some ways aloof and ignorant in his response. And that is that's frustrating as well. As you play for, the city, you make, tens of millions, of dollars a year, in part, not entirely, but in part because, you are supported by the people in the city, and, now your city is suffering miserably. And you're not up on it. Like, I get that. I do. I get that frustration. And it was one I held as well. Again, it does not make him the spokesperson, or that he should aspire to be that. And there are lots of ways to even quietly be very supportive in ways that I can't because, I don't look up it, go on Basketball Reference to look up his contract. I don't got money like
A
that.
lot. A lot.
I have a newsletter. But he, I like, and so there are ways he can be supportive, but I do think that it is reasonable to expect him, given how proximate it was in theory to his life, to be more informed than he appeared to let on anyway. And so that is something that I do understand, and I don't think that you have to again be a eloquent spokesperson to be able to learn enough with which to present a point of view with more conviction than what Anthony did.
I got another question for you. Have you read Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman?
Nah, I'm not.
I think this is the most important book of the last 50 years. And
50?
Ultimately, so Postman writes this book in 1985. After, obviously, 1984, where there was this Orwellian prediction that by 1984, we'd live under this authoritarian society. But he was comparing it to Huxley's Brave New World, where it was less about being under authoritarian rule and more that we would be kind of amused into a certain level of passivity, where we would stop thinking. And so Postman writes this book in 1985, and he's talking about how TV is changing the political landscape. It's changing public discourse. It's changing the way we think. And he was a technological skeptic. And he's like, we're in trouble, guys. And so we look now, 40 years later, and he's writing this pre-internet, pre-social media, pre-all the things. We are truly entertained to death. What is the role of journalism at this stage, at this day and age, and this stage of time, where we're not thinking, where people have stopped reading, where we're being so informed and kind of informed by our algorithms and these bite-sized bits of information more than we are true discourse? What's your role in this society?
I think that question, though a good one, is not one that lends itself to the soundbite that, not saying you per se, but many people might expect. Like, oh, journalists are like the vanguards in the last, for this, like sort of defense.
I don't want a soundbite. I want a real answer.
But no, I think that people can at times put on too much sort of responsibility in all kinds of journalists to necessarily to be like, again, like the bulwark of like democracy or something like that. That's not what I'm I don't think that. I think sometimes, again, like just even to speak on sports media, it is okay for your specialty to be explaining who won the game in a really cool and eloquent way, like, and as informative. The problem of journalism is a structural one primarily, where the many of the people who own media do not want media to tell inconvenient truths about the people who control the media. That sounds like conspiratorial. I do not mean it. Please do not sound. Again, no sound bites, right?
That's the part I'm going to put.
But people like Jeff Bezos, for example, he recently laid off a lot of people from the Washington Post, which is the paper he owns, and including notably the person whose full-time job was covering Amazon. The Washington Post had always been a place that had covered Amazon, both like, just in general, like cool stuff, not so cool stuff. They were covering it. And so it is not, I do not find it coincidental whatsoever that he would do that, especially after also dramatically changing the way that the Washington Post opinion side worked, where the edict was for the opinion writers was to only write about support for free markets and liberties and personal liberties. That was like the only that everything had to be funneled and filtered through that. And if you did not support free markets and personal liberties, like that's not something you wanted in the opinion page. That is something that is a message that is quite comfortable with someone who runs Amazon. Like you get to both in obviously the free market part of like, there should be no regulation for anything I do, no matter how many, businesses I destroy along the way of building these giant warehouses where people get to express themselves freely express themselves through their consumption. Like that is an opinion page built in your image. And so, and that's just one slice of critique on how Bezos has run the paper in recent years. But that is that's a problem among so much of, again, institutional and corporate media, which is not to say that institutional corporate media doesn't do really important things. Even now, the Washington Post is doing some very good journalism, but they're doing a lot less of it, due to how Bezos is running the paper. And so I don't begrudge anyone who decides like, I'm not going to subscribe, which, to this because they're not serving me as well as they used to, which actually is a good segue into kind of where I see myself as like, what is my role as a journalist. The Washington Post also completely cut their sports pages. Going back to your thought about, from the Postman book about entertaining yourselves to death. The Washington Post sports desk did great work on just who won the game, but they did a lot more than just that. They had an investigative team. They had, columnists who were at times very critical about, race and identity,
right?
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Yeah. Like, they've done, like, again, for ESPN heads around the horn, a place that like does a lot of great sports chatter, but not just that. They talk about other things too. Those are two Washington Posties, Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, who, kind of matured at that paper before becoming the Around the Horn guys. Like that, they cut that desk entirely. The Washington Post does not cover sports anymore. Why? Well, they argued, I guess the people made the cuts, that sports were not something that was beneficial to the business and to the consumers that they wanted. I don't think that's a rational choice. I think they're going to lose a lot of subscriptions because there are a lot of people who necessarily want to know everything happening, in the White House, but like want to know, why the Wizards traded for Trae Young, and they don't have that anymore, or
because the front office is stupid and they have no idea what they're doing. There's the column.
There you go. So, but like, people, but there are a lot of readers, who liked that the Washington Post covered the city of DC and all of its institutions, not just federal stuff, the big politics, national news, but like local things, and they cut all of that. And so, again, it's not rational, but it is what it is. But my point in this is that if you make cuts like that, if you decide that you don't need a sports desk, there's still going to be an audience for sports, but the only people who are funding it, for the most part, are other newspapers who have also been decimated by cuts, rights holders, meaning like ESPN and Fox Sports and stuff, places that at times still do very good journalism, not even at times, often do, but do a lot more like stuff that is not, deeply accountability oriented, which is, again, not particularly surprising when you have significant business relationships with the places that you are doing, with which you are supposed to be covering. Again, ESPN makes most of its money from broadcasting, sporting events, whether it's, combat sports like boxing, UFC, or NFL, or or NBA, all that, like, that is where they make their money. And so it's hard to expect Satan to cast out Satan, so to speak, with the same level of vigor and intensity when Satan is filling your pocket. Again, not saying sports are satanic. Let's be clear. Not a soundbite. But anyway, but like,
too.
But yeah, right. Clip that. Yeah, clip. Remember that Pharrell speech? Was like soundbite this. Like where you just every sentence he said at some sort of like award ceremony. It was real corny. That's how I feel right now though. Like
You
soundbite
didn't eat
this.
the way you thought you ate, bro.
Yeah. No, you did not. Our goats are declining, man. They're all getting washed. Anyway, but then you have stuff like again, the people who are making sports media, gambling companies. Again, they have a business interest in the reason why they're covering sports. And it's not to say that gambling companies can't do cool sports coverage, but it's all geared towards supporting the business of separating you from your money by, by doing a 30-leg parlay, which may not necessarily be beneficial to you. If you don't have any sort of self-control over how much money you're spending, which happen to be, of course, the best gambling customers, the ones who don't have good self-control and aren't consistently beating the odds, so to speak, playing the odds smartly. That is the sports media landscape. It's rights holders, it's gambling, it's beat up newspapers that don't have a lot of ability to cover things anymore, and it's also the league themselves. The NFL Network, NBA TV. MLB Network. And they staff themselves quite well, but there is a narrative that you have to adhere to if you write for them. Where you could talk about who won or lost the game, and I say this speaking to friends of mine who work for all of these different publications, and do really the best work they can within the pockets that they're in. But you can talk about who won and lost the game. You can even critique players and coaches and general managers for decisions that they made, but you cannot critique the ownership. That is something that does not happen, for the NFL.com writer. And when you do critique the ownership, you have a situation like there's a columnist now retired named Jim Trotter, who would frequently bring it to the NFL and Roger Goodell himself about why they weren't hiring enough minorities, and he of course gets laid off, sues the NFL a discrimination lawsuit, and settles for God knows how much money. God bless Jim Trotter. I'm happy for him because I know that with that he was paid enough to not need to go to discovery and look through the receipts that this decades-long, reporter had of evidence of racial bias within the NFL. Stuff that we already see with our eyes, but but he had the paper trail, and and I'm sure the NFL did not want that to happen and they show up in publicly accessible court documents and trials. So that's sports media, bro. Everyone, there's so and that squeezes out is it creates a system that Neil Postman seems to be describing, of where you are entertained to death, because the only thing that you can actually get out there sometimes, and even still, is that's more financially precarious, is who won or lost the game.
Yeah, I highly recommend you check out the book. I think you'd enjoy it. But Bradford and I are both lifelong New Yorkers, meaning we graduated from high school here. We're not those people who we're from here, but we went to high school somewhere else and then we came back. No, we're from here, which means there's a certain kind of fandom that comes with us, in particular that orange and blue. I actually have on Knicks sweatpants right now. I know you don't. What I appreciate about your journalism is you are not the hot take guy, but I'm going to give you 60 seconds to ISO right now and tell me why the Knicks are going to win it all this year. I'm scared about next year, but tell me 60 seconds why this year is the year for our beloved Knicks.
I'm going to use the first 5 seconds to tilt my head a little bit so you can see my picture of Chris Childs punching Kobe Bryant. All right. Yes. First, okay, so the reason why the Knicks are going to win is because the Cavs are always fraudulent in the playoffs. The Knicks have way more shooting than the Pistons. And I don't rate anyone else in the East. Maybe the Celtics if Tatum comes back, but Tatum's had his moments too. I know he has a ring, but he is not reliable in the same way, which is why he gets benched in the Olympics. As other top 10-ish kind of players. Then that's assuming he comes back, right? Which I kind of think he will, but it's whatever. And listen, the Thunder, similarly, they have a ring, but they had a lot of issues that that emerged during the playoffs, even as they won it all. Some of these games were way too close given the amount of talent on that roster. We already beat Wemby in a championship. We already are the champions. Shoot, that's all I had to say. We are the defending champions of the NFL, but we are the defending champions, and so raise the banner, Jim Dolan. We did it. They can't take that away from us, and so everything that happens from this point on is a title defense. You need to speak from a victory mentality, not not the subservient last 50 years of Knicks failure, but we actually we're real contenders, and Jalen Brunson is icy at all points whenever we need him. So that's my Knicks take.
There it is. We're going to have to come back and do a part 2 because there's a lot more that I would love to get to with you. Listen, I wanted to be a journalist when I was younger. That was my goal. That was what I was going to major in. And my mom, being the good immigrant that she is, said, no, you need to do something that makes money. So I ended up majoring in finance, and I kind of flamed out. But now here I am doing this thing. And my mother says to me a few weeks ago, that podcast thing you do is pretty good. And I really like your writing. You should get one of those jobs where you do that. So here we are,
Mom,
full circle. But I thank you, Bradford, as a real journalist, sitting with me and giving me some of your time today. And I thank you for tuning in to another episode of Tell Me More. Go ahead, drop in the comments. What's a nugget you took away from this episode? Because Bradford really dropped some gems. And I'll see you next time as I ask you to tell me more.